Thank you so much, Gary, and it is an honor for me to be able to be spending this weekend with all of you, my Washington NFB family. There's nothing better than spending time with members of the National Federation of the Blind and being here in Washington this weekend. We have often heard that with proper training and confidence, blindness can be reduced to a nuisance, reduced to just being a characteristic, like having blonde hair or big feet. Is this true? Is this possible? Last week we held our convention of the National Federation of the Blind in Colorado. When Brent Bertrand got up to make his acceptance speech as he was elected second vice president of the NFB of Colorado, Brent said, "Being blind is the best thing that ever happened to me." Has anyone ever thought that? What do you all think about that? I was born in Red Wing, Minnesota. And don't worry, I won't go through every year of my life right now. But I was born in Red Wing, Minnesota. I have an older sister, Diane. She's 2 years older than I am. And when I was around a year old, people started talking to my mom and dad, and they said, "You know, we've been watching Julie, and we're wondering, do you think that she sees okay?" And my mom and dad said, "Yeah, well, we think she's just fine." And they didn't really want to think about it, or maybe just thought that everything was fine. And then when I was around 18 months old, they took me to get my picture taken, and the photographer threw a ball towards me so that I would look up and catch the ball, and I didn't attempt to catch the ball. So at that point, they did take me to see an ophthalmologist, and they were told that I was blind. But they were told that I had some vision, but that I was blind. As you can imagine, they didn't know what to do. They had never met a blind person. They didn't know a thing about blindness. But they also wanted to have another child, talked with the doctors, and doctors said, "Oh, there's no chance that you would ever have another blind child at all." And of course, they did not want to risk having another blind child, not knowing anything about blindness. And so my brother John, who is 2 years younger than me, was born. And guess what? John was also blind. My parents were extremely upset. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know any blind people. And as many of you have experienced as well, they were hoping that maybe that there would be a cure, that something could be done. They weren't sure what to do. But at the same time that they were dealing with the fact that my brother and I were blind, they also hoped that we could have a great life and a happy life and a good life. And I'm so fortunate, and so was my brother John, because my mom and dad had very high expectations for us. We were pushed. We did chores just like my sister did chores. And I remember learning how to, I was vacuuming, and I wasn't quite sure how to plug in the vacuum cleaner. And I got shocked a time or so, but you know what? I got good at plugging in that vacuum cleaner, and my mom expected, and so did my dad, that I would do everything around the house. One thing that I'll always remember is when I was around 4 years old, my mom came home and she had a brailler with her. And at that time, they didn't teach blind kids Braille until we were in first grade. And so I thought, what is that? What is that? And, you know, I love my mom so much. And my mom and dad, today, they're both 85 years old. But my mom went above and beyond, and she learned Braille so that She could follow along, do our homework with us, and do everything that it would take. She also fought really hard for us to be able to attend public schools. And so my brother and I were the first two kids in Littleton public schools. And my mom always said to us as we were growing up, and I have this philosophy too, she would say, life is what you make it. And that is just so true. It's up to each of us to have a happy, great life. I had the best teacher in the whole wide world. Her name was Mrs. Gump. And Mrs. Gump, she was my itinerant teacher. Probably, we know that Denise Mackenstad up here, that she is an amazing, amazing, amazing teacher. Well, Mrs. Gump was really hard on me. And she circled every little mistake I made in Braille. She made sure I knew Braille inside and out. And again, she had those high expectations of me. I was fortunate enough to get to learn Braille, even though I had some vision. I could read some large print. I did learn how to read print, but truly I wasn't fluent reading print. But I have to tell all of you, I was so embarrassed about being blind. And I tried to hide my blindness. I was ashamed. And as much as my mom and dad wanted to do everything for us and pushed us and had high expectations, they felt so bad about us being blind. So I had all of those influences and I had great opportunity, but I really tried to hide my blindness. I did not use a cane. I was given a cane in high school, and my instructor said, her name was Ina Dopkins from Philadelphia. And Ina said, Julie, all you need to do is get that cane out when you're crossing the street. Unfold that cane, and then you can fold that cane right back up and hide it. So, again, that perpetuated the way that I felt about being blind, that it truly was embarrassing to be blind, that I should be ashamed of being blind. I graduated from high school and I took off to college. I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder. I went there with no cane and really not all that much confidence at all. I joined a sorority because that's the thing to do. I thought it would be kind of fun, and I was interested in trying to meet some fraternity guys too. I thought that would be great. But again, I had no confidence in myself, and I was really hiding my blindness. I was even afraid to go to the dining room to eat, to go get food, because I didn't know how I would carry a tray or how I would find a place to sit. So I bought food and had snacks in my room a lot, which wasn't probably the best plan. I had a Spanish class that I had enrolled in, and it was in a part of campus where there were a lot of steps. And remember, I did not use a cane. So I tried to memorize where all the steps were on the whole CU campus. It's a large campus, and they had a lot of steps around. So I remember dropping my Spanish class because I couldn't get there. I couldn't get there. Again, hiding my blindness, not feeling good about that part of me at all, that characteristic, my blindness. So I was living in Boulder. I was living at my sorority house. Every month the phone would ring, and I would pick it up, and then she would say, "Hello, this is Judy with the National Federation of the Blind of Boulder. Would you like to come to a meeting?" And every month, for months on end, I would say, "Oh, no, I'm very busy. I'm not able to go." But I was polite. I would say, "Thank you for calling." Well, Judy did not give up. And that's something that we should all remember, that none of us should give up when we're trying to teach everybody about the National Federation of the Blind. Judy did not give up. She continued to call me, and I will never forget the first meeting that I attended in Boulder for the National Federation of the Blind of Boulder, because at that meeting there were dynamic blind people. There were people there that felt good about who they were. They were not hiding their blindness, and they took me in with open arms, and they said, you know, you can feel great about who you are too. I didn't quite believe that at that time, but they were really nice people, great energy, and I thought, you know, I think I kind of like this National Federation of the Blind. I'm going to keep going to some meetings. There were several things that influenced me at that time. There was a film that had come out called We Know Who We Are, and it was a film that showed students at the training center at the Iowa Commission for the Blind. And I'll always remember the end of the film, and it says, "We know who we are, and we will never go back." And it stuck with me forever and ever and ever. So I worked at the Disabled Students Office in Boulder that summer, and Homer, he was a director of the office, and he was totally blind. And he ran around that campus everywhere. He did everything you can imagine. I still wasn't quite using a cane then, because I was pretty stubborn and I thought I did not need a cane. And I also told everyone I don't want to be dependent upon a cane. I don't want to depend upon a cane. So one day, Homer said to me, "Julie, tomorrow I would like you to attend a meeting in downtown Boulder. And you're going to need to go there, and you're going to need to be taking notes at this meeting." And I said, how will I get there? Well, he said, "You'll be taking the bus down there, of course." And so the next day, I stayed awake all night. I was so scared. I thought, what in the world, what am I going to do? But I couldn't admit that I was nervous about it. So the next day, I said, okay, I'll go into the meeting now. I walked outside, and I thought I was waiting in a bus stop, but a bus never came. So I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess I can't go downtown then. I'm just not going to be able to go. I went back into the office, and I said, well, Homer, I'm really sorry, but I don't know what happened, but somehow the bus just never came. And he said, "Julie, I will walk out with you to make sure that you were at the bus stop." And he said, "Even though the meeting is over, I'm going to ask that you go downtown, you find the courthouse, and then you can come back." Now, all of us have had people that have pushed us and challenged us. And I did go downtown, and I did find that courthouse, and I did feel really great about myself when I went back there and said, I found it. I found this courthouse. Diane McGeorge and Ray McGeorge were major influences on me throughout my journey in my dealing with my own blindness. Of course, many of you know Diane McGeorge very well. Diane's such a strong woman. She started the Colorado Center for the Blind, and she kept me in line many a time, and I think she kept Marcy in line too. Oh yeah. Also, Ray was the most caring, loving, thoughtful person that you would ever want to know, and he, in his quiet way, kept us all in line as well. So I went off, I finished college, I went to every convention. I started going to conventions in 1978. I've never missed one national convention. And in 1982, I was living in Boulder, and people said, oh, there's this young woman that's moving to Boulder, and her name is Marcy Carpenter, and you guys are the same age and everything. And I was so excited. because here it was going to be. I was going to be friends, have a great friend with someone just exactly my same age. And I still remember when Marcy moved to Boulder and meeting her for the first time, and how much I just thought of her from the very minute that I met Marcy. Because Marcy has always been, for me, a very steady influence, and she always gave me great advice. We had so much fun together. You guys can imagine, as young, very young, 20, how old were we, Marcy? 23, 22. So we had a lot of did a lot of partying, a little bit at least, had a lot of fun meals together. But more than that, together, we learn more and more about ourselves as blind people through the National Federation of the Blind, and we also built the Boulder chapter together too. And it's so much fun getting to be here, and I have to say, don't you all think Marcy is doing a most phenomenal job? She is. I do love Marcy so much, and it is so great to be able to be here this weekend and just to see how she's conducting everything. In 1984, I moved to Denver, and I obtained a job. Actually, this is because of my work in the National Federation of the Blind. They called me and they said, the turnover rate for VR counselors working with blind is really high. And they called me and they said, would you like to interview for a position as a vocational rehabilitation counselor? And so I interviewed, and I got the job, and I moved to Denver. And I have to tell all of you, for those of you that are students, those of you who are trying to figure out what you might like to do, I gained and learned and grew so much in the 13 years that I worked as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. In that position, you touch hundreds of people, and you really make such a difference. So keep that in mind as a career. I really did love the job, and I still see people running around, and they remember me, and they'll say, I remember talking to you. And I was able to steer a lot of people towards the National Federation of the Blind. And again, I learned a lot with them, together with them. So I'm going to move forward kind of fast, because I know you guys are going to want to go to hospitality a little later. So in 1993, my son Robert was born. And again, I didn't know a lot about having children and all. I really talked with all of my blind friends about how to do things, and I still remember calling Diane up and saying, how am I going to give him a bath? What if, he's so small? And I remember Diane McGeorge talking to me and saying, Julie, I know you can do it. You can do it. You're going to be fine. And there were so many little things like that we would talk with each other about, where I would call Diane or call other blind people who had had children to get their advice. Like, how am I going to push them in a stroller? How will we do this? How will we do this? And these are the kinds of things that we do in the National Federation of the Blind. In 1995, I was still working as a voc rehab counselor, but I had the honor to go with staff at the Colorado Center for the Blind to Poland to do a 2-week training session for people in Poland area. We talked about advocacy, we talked about teaching cane travel, we talked about our rights, we talked about employment, but more than that, I had an opportunity to really see how we were making a difference day after day after day, one-on-one in provision and providing training. So when I returned back to Colorado, I was really wanting to work at the Colorado Center for the Blind. I love the energy. And I had always been very involved, as you would know, in the National Federation of the Blind, serving as president of the NFB of Denver and secretary of our state affiliate. I have to tell you, I was the secretary of our state affiliate for about 25 years, and then finally Buna took over as secretary for a while, so I was really excited about that. Thank you, Buna, for doing that. So in 1997, September of 1997, I began working at the Colorado Center for the Blind. And I remember working with Doug. And again, Doug always offered a lot of stability, and I loved watching Doug Trimble teach. Doug has such full belief in blind people, and it was fun being able to work with Doug. And also having Laura around was a lot of fun too. And I still remember, Laura, that you worked at Farmers Insurance. Yes. So Buna DeHaul started training as a student at the Colorado Center for the Blind, and she called me a lot prior to coming in to training. She had a million questions, which I'm sure no one's surprised about that if you know Buna. On Buna's first day, she went rock climbing, and then Buna was a bit rebellious, so I have just a short story to tell you all about Buna. All of the students were supposed to go on an outing, on a long walk down a trail, and we found out that Buna did not go. She ended up going with one of our other students to the shopping mall to buy a rice cooker. So this is I was fairly recently working at the center. I wasn't exactly sure how to handle this, but I know Buna doesn't forget this because I called her into my office and she said, well, I did get an experience traveling at the mall. And I said, Buna, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. So it's kind of fun to see again how we all grow up in the National Federation of the Blind. Again, what about our blindness? Is it a characteristic? What do we all think? So I was a single mom at this point, and I would take my son Robert on the bus. And I know many of you as parents have encountered this. Take your child, my child was very small on the bus, and the driver would say, isn't that so nice that he takes care of you? How many times have we heard that as blind parents? So in March of 1999, I became the director at the Colorado Center for the Blind. I was very scared about it, and I thought, oh no, now that I'm going to be the director, I hope the center lasts. I did kind of think that a little bit, and we all have a few doubts about ourselves. But again, thanks to the love of the National Federation of the Blind, thanks to Diane and Ray, and the NFB and the staff at the Colorado Center, things went really well, and of course I love working there so much. Now there's always difficult things that happen in anything that we're all doing, and it can take a lot of strength to work through some of those things. So it was in the summer of 2000, and we had a student that had come into the center, and he had come in a couple months prior, and he had come in, he was blind as a result of a brain injury. He had driven into a tree, and that's how he lost his vision. And I was at work one day and got a call, and our student Todd had committed suicide at our student apartments. And it was something that can happen, for anyone. He had a lot of issues though, but what mattered is it brought everyone even closer together, all of our staff, all of our students, and everyone in the NFB. We all went to the hospital. He was on life supports for a while, and talked to him and everything, and talked with his family. And his family was very understanding about it all. It was very difficult. And I was living on my own, just with my son. And every morning, though, for the next week, at 6 o'clock in the morning, my phone would ring. And ring, ring, ring. It would be Dr. Maurer calling me. He'd say, "Julie, how are you? Are you okay?" That is the power of the National Federation of the Blind. And that is the love and support that we give each other. Today at the center we have a legacy garden to celebrate and honor all of our students and our seniors and those in the National Federation of the Blind that we'll always remember. So, how has my blindness played a role in my life? How is your blindness part of your life for you? And just think about that a little bit. So, because I'm blind, I got to meet my husband that I love more than anything in the world, Dan Burke, who's sitting up here at the table. We get to share our lives together now, and we get to have so many adventures. And one of the things that we love to do up in Loveland is go visit a sculpture park. And there's over like 150 to 200 sculptures. And so I feel like it's like our playground to be able to do that. So it's the small things in life, those fun things that we get to do. Back to Brent. I talked with you about Brent at the beginning of this all. Brent Bertrand is the Assistant Director at the Colorado Center for the Blind. And Brent is also the second Vice President of the NFB of Colorado. Brent was a student at the Colorado Center in 2001. He came to us from Maine. He's what we say, an RP guy. And his wife, Ina, was a student also. Of course, they didn't know each other before they arrived. Ina was from California, from LA. Brent came from Maine. Ina came from LA. They met pretty quickly. They fell in love, and they have 5 children. So now you can understand why Brent said that being blind is the best thing that ever happened for him. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to the National Federation of the Blind. I have full belief in myself as a blind person. And we want all of you in your journey of being blind to feel that same way. Together with love, hope, and determination, we're going to move forward, and we're going to continue to make a difference for all blind people and work together. Thank you.